one of the best ways to learn about how YouTube thinks and how they make decisions and choices about content they surface and don't surface, and what they do about their business model, and how all that impacts us as creators, is to really deeply understand YouTube's story. There is a new book out from this guy we're going to be talking here to today, Mark Bergen. Like, comment, and subscribe. The subtitle is Inside YouTube's Chaotic Rise to World Domination. And in this book, he goes into great detail about how YouTube got started, all the decisions they made along the way, and most importantly, what it means for us as creators as we are building our businesses and our audiences on this platform. What does that mean for us today? And what does that mean for us looking forward into the future, given the trajectory that YouTube is on? All of that and a lot more coming up in today's episode.
Hey, welcome to the Video Creators Podcast. You know how you put a lot of time and energy into your YouTube channel for not nearly enough growth? Yeah, we get it. We're here today to help you change that.
Mark, it's so good to have you on the podcast, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on this. First of all, for people who aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to the place where you are now writing books about YouTube's history.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I am a reporter with Bloomberg News and have been here since 2015, so like decades in internet years. I came out of college and then the financial crisis hit. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I had this idea that like journalism was like really fascinating in explaining things, being able to like tell these kind of interesting stories in these gray areas. And after the financial crisis, I was like, I really like to explain how economics and finance and business works. And then some mentors there were like, well, if you're really interested in becoming a business journalist, you should go to Asia. And so I went to India about a decade ago and spent a couple of years there as a freelance reporter, kind of hustling and writing stories about India. And that's where I got into tech. There was India is obviously like the back office to the world, but there's also like a lot of really fascinating technology products and innovation coming out of the country. And so I kind of came into tech journalism from India, started writing about Google in 2015, first with Recode, and then I came to Bloomberg News. And it was really at that time, it's so funny, like there was so much happening at Google, right? There, everything from self-driving cars and biotech to search, obviously, and ads. Yeah. And YouTube became, since 2015, has become more and more important to Google's business. And then it became a much bigger headache for Google, right? Because we had these series of like the ads boycotts, everyone probably remembers from 2017. It became a much more complicated, like political and regulatory issue. And I started talking with people who worked at YouTube, and I got the sense like they were just kind of scratching the surface of what was happening, and like really no one had taken a step back to tell the entire story of this like really fascinating platform and this like company within another company, right? And that's how I started down the path.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago when we first met, you flew out here to my house and spent a couple days here and made a really good podcast episode for Bloomberg on telling our story. I'll put a link in the show notes for anyone who's interested. It's way shorter than these. It's like 20 minutes long. And I actually, Mark, now have that episode linked on our About Us page on our website.
Oh, nice.
It's because I feel like it does a good job at like giving a synopsis of who we are and what we do here at Video Creators. But I remember when we met back then, I was like, wow, here's a guy, his entire job is just to write about what YouTube is doing. From a business perspective, from a financial perspective, from a creator perspective, from an advertising perspective. And so you have a very well-rounded perspective on YouTube and Google as a whole, whereas a lot of what I deal with day to day is just the creator perspective, And so when you wrote this book, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm reading through it, a couple reactions I had was, number one, the opening chapters were so fun for me to like relive again. I'm like, Freddie Wong, yes, iJustine, and all these creators that were huge, like when this platform, even before,
and also like doing this before there was any money, right? Like already guaranteed, right? Yeah. They were like trailblazers.
And that's a whole nother topic. Actually, we did a recent episode about what happens to your creativity when you introduce money to it, and the research indicates that it's not great, actually. But before the partner program came, like this whole platform was very, very different, and it was like, 16, 17, I don't even know, years ago or something like that. And I had forgotten a lot about it because you're just so in the here and now. So it was good for me to go back and like, yes, I remember that. Oh, I remember what that looked like. And you're talking about people that I knew personally back then because it was such a small community and it's huge now. But yeah, I could definitely tell through reading through it that you have a lot of different perspectives here that I think would be really valuable for our conversation here today about what does this look like for us as creators as we go through it. I'd love to hear, just kind of kick things off, about as we look at YouTube's history and their story overall, how has their approach or their attitude or to creators changed over time? Because at first, like I haven't told this story too often. Back in the early days, right after YouTube acquired or Google acquired YouTube, they had one of the problems that I experienced with them is that there was no one at YouTube who understood overall how the platform worked. They had people who knew just their individual silos, but no one overall. And so there was a brief period of time when Google used me to help train some of their new employees coming on board of like, give us the overall perspective of how YouTube worked. And I know at that time they had a different perspective on creators. So yeah, maybe like start at the beginning. Walk us through the role that creators.
Yeah, I mean, there's something that like I learned in researching the book. Like initially, they had this team. So this was before there was the term creators, right? Like initially, it was just everyone was user, and at one point it was like people who were on this video site hanging out watching YouTube were probably making videos too, right? It was like that was the whole premise, was the solution that YouTube saw was like really hard to upload and share video. It was like clumsy or expensive, and then like that's where YouTube like hit that perfect timing and had some like great features in there. So they hired this early team they called community managers that I didn't know. They actually, if you remember this, they picked the homepage. Everyone had the same page.
It was hand-picked, yeah.
Which is kind of wild to think about now. But like they also had this ability to kind of turn creators into stars overnight, right? Like Jack Conte, who now runs Patreon, was one of the earliest. His music video, one of the community managers found it, put it on the homepage. They had like I think over 1 million views pretty early on, and like his career kind of takes off from there. But I think it was really interesting. The company thought of it as like a framework of this is our community. Like we're setting these rules. It wasn't they didn't use the word platform necessarily back then a lot, right? Yeah. It was like, we're going to set rules because it's a reflection of our community. And like content moderation and like the feature set is like, we're kind of trying to be responsive to the people who are uploading videos, who are using it. A lot of this was because they were still like, even from early on, they were pretty big, but they weren't what they are today, right? And you don't have the like 500 hours uploaded every minute kind of thing, right? And like a global scale. So even to 2007 was really early for the partner programs when they started sharing ad revenue. Yeah. But even I think that first group was like about 30 or so. You had like Phil DeFranco. You had like some ones that were still around, like you mentioned iJustine, but then there were a lot that, Annoying Orange was really big back then, and Smosh obviously still around, but it was pretty limited, and YouTube just like thought that, I talk about this a lot in the book, they had these teams called like the head, the torso, and the long tail, right? And the head was like, they thought their business strategy was like, we need to get TV and network and studios onto YouTube. Like no one's going to watch user-generated content, or we don't think that's going to be, people are watching it, but we don't think advertisers are going to want to get in front of that, right? And so that wasn't really part of their business strategy. Like there were a few people who I think were kind of had the foresight to be like, no, the creators, YouTubers are actually like going to be the future of this platform. But for a long time, inside Google, that it was like, we need to be kind of like a Netflix model, right? Like we need record labels to come on for music videos. They tried to get a deal with CBS for, I guess, no, was it CBS? ABC had Lost. It was like the most popular show. They're trying to get Lost on YouTube.
Yeah.
Which would have been crazy, right?
Yeah.
And they were trying to get like The Amazing Race to come on. So for a long time, they kind of neglected the creator community, and so you saw like multi-channel networks fill that void where you had a lot of these studios like dealt with talent management. One of my favorite stories in the book was they remember Studio 71. It's this early multi-channel network. They work with the Annoying Orange, who was like one of the biggest YouTubers in the world, like a decade ago, right?
Time, yeah.
And his manager calls up YouTube and is like, "Hey, I'm the manager for the Annoying Orange," and someone at YouTube is like, "What?" Like, no idea what that means, right? And he's like, "Oh, it's like George Clooney has a manager, right? Like, I'm the Annoying Orange's manager. Like, you have to talk to me to get." So it was just like Google they've come a long way, right? Light years since then. But the model for Google was always like, we're organizing the web's information. We don't deal with like people management. We don't deal with like talent. There was a key acquisition that they made in 2010, like the Next New Networks. You remember that team that came on?
Yeah.
And that was when they started using the term creator. And then it really wasn't until like 2014 when they were like, oh, maybe creators are going to be not just an important part, but perhaps like the most vital part of our strategy going forward. And then I think you started to see a shift then.
Yeah, I don't remember what year it was. YouTube had $100 million fund that they split up between, what year was that? Do you remember?
Well, they had multiple ones. The first one was in 2011. Like the original fund where they were actually like funding channels for the first time.
Yeah, and they gave like millions of dollars to Hollywood celebrities, A-list celebrities, and homegrown YouTubers alike. And from what I understand, almost all of the Hollywood celebrities fizzled out and never really got much traction on YouTube, except for like one or two. If I remember right.
But then SciShow, Crash Course, like some of these.
Yeah, Philip DeFranco I think he started, what was the news one on the side? With the 4 hosts. I don't
remember that name either, but that one was also.
Man, I'm drawing a blank. I used to love that channel. But all the homegrown YouTubers like took that $1 million and created channels that are still sustainable today, like almost a decade later from that. So I think at that time was like, oh my goodness, like just because you can quickly attract 4 million people instantly on television doesn't mean you can attract anyone on YouTube. And that's when I started understanding that these epiphany moments around like viewer expectations are different on television than they are on social media. The audience expects and is looking for different type of value on television versus YouTube, and what performs in one place doesn't necessarily perform well on the other. So
I think that's also true. And then there was a show that part of that fund was this show called.
That was it. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, nice. There's a show called Wigs that was meant to be like a digital channel for women, and it had Julia Stiles. It had like these A-list actresses, and they brought in these big time Hollywood directors, right? And like it didn't take off. Like I don't know if people remember that at all.
I don't remember that one. No.
Yeah, but the part of I talked to people at YouTube, and they're like, well, one of the problems with Wigs, it was like the sort of episodic. It was like each episode was meant to be. It was kind of like a same. The show had the same arc, but it was like each episode was a different story.
Sure.
And then like it didn't fit into like. They didn't get picked up in the recommendation engine, right? Because it was like unclear what it was doing. Sort of at the time, like a lot of the focus on recommendation and like search and discovery is like you need to have. And I know this it's not necessarily just the secret, but like SEO was really important, and like having a certain association, and like these showrunners, even when they got YouTube money, didn't understand like the mechanics of how it works on search and discovery, and so like. That was I'm sure the show was fine. Like maybe it was missing like some of that intimacy and like authenticity that does well on YouTube, for sure.
Well, I think in those early days, it was growing on YouTube. It seemed like there was a disproportionate. I don't know if the advantage is the right word, but it was about connecting with other real people, as opposed to watching a polished show.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's been changing over time. But years ago, it was about connection, not presentation. And and a lot of those shows, and I think that's what Hollywood lacked coming to the platform, was the element of connection. Social media was so new that people didn't know that social was the key part of the media. So let's fast forward to where we are today. What is YouTube's approach to creators today? What does that look like?
Yeah, I do think TikTok is introduced a competition that's forced YouTube to pay more attention to creator and like to provide more resources. And so, but even since like 2017, and I think before then, but there was an urgency after the ad boycotts in 2017 to come up with, like, YouTube calls it alternative monetization, right? Like, and they feel like they were at one point were pushing these things a lot harder, but that's still, like, the goal is, and I think it's a smart move, is to like get creators to diversify revenue, right? Like because the problems that YouTube has faced with advertisers pulling the plug or getting reluctant or wanting like certain ad filters, that's gotten a lot better in the past 5 years. We don't see, but it's still there. Like, that problem is still an issue when like one advertiser pulls money that affects on one video channel that affects everyone else, right? Like, that's the kind of way the economy works. So YouTube wants creators to like build lasting careers. And there's some opportunities they missed, right? Like, I think there are people at YouTube that are like, why didn't we build Patreon? Or why couldn't we bought Patreon?
Why didn't we build TikTok before TikTok built TikTok?
Well, definitely like that. I think, but I mean, so I do see them, like, obviously, like, short form is a huge focus right now. I think it feels like short form has almost stepped in as the top priority above. I feel like if you asked me that question like 2 years ago, I would have said like alternative monetization is like the top priority for creators. Now it feels like short form is. I don't know if you agree with that, but
well, here's what's going through my head, and I haven't talked about this before, but I'm curious to hear your reaction to this. Is like, there's this innovation cycle, or not cycle, I don't know, graph or whatever, that when you're a startup, you're innovating, you're pioneering, you're taking new ground, you're doing things that have never been done before, you're taking risks, and it's either like success or just total bust. And as you become more and more successful, like a company like YouTube, like, it becomes more risky to take risks and try new things, and so your innovation ends up plateauing on this scale, and then you end up copying what other people are proving to be successful, and then after that, it's just a slow decline over time. Do you see that as where possibly we're at?
Yeah, I think that's, like, the biggest fear for people that I talk to at YouTube is not like they're afraid of TikTok, but they're afraid of stagnation. And that's like a Google thing, right? Like, Google's biggest fear for a long time was becoming Microsoft. This is before Microsoft kind of reinvented itself and is now like a cool kid again. But like, that was always Google's fear. And I think it's the same with YouTube. I think YouTube does move very slowly. Like, it's like someone described it as like a tanker. It just like takes really small turns. And I think in part because like they know that any turn they make has like big consequences for creators. A lot of people who make money on, like, who depend on the platform. They'll push back and say they're innovating on like YouTube TV, and like, I don't know if that's necessarily innovative. It's like that's a really seamless product. Like, it works really well.
I like it. Yeah.
It's not.
I don't know. I don't think that they're disappearing anytime soon, or it just feels like the innovation. And Apple did the same thing. The iPhone and the touchscreen, that was like innovative, and now it's like more of the bigger. A different color.
It is really like, I try to get this across in the book too. Like, there's funny anecdotes about like, the marketing team is like 30 different people have to approve like one tweet they send. Like, Google is just, it is like, I think this might change now if we're entering a recession, but like, it is a big bureaucratic place. It's like really hard to get things done. That's what you consistently hear from people there. And I think YouTube is a little bit different. Like, but it's still the same. And TikTok is certainly like a new threat and kind of makes them a bit more nimble. Regulation is probably a bigger concern that they have right now. One thing they launched that kind of was like last month, right? I don't know if you even noticed, or other people, like this education service? Did you say that, like the new education learning platform? Yeah, it's weird. It seems smart. Like part of the book
Like
too
an
talks
LMS
about
on YouTube?
yeah, like they're actually like now
I
you can
saw
do
years ago they started kicking the tires or something like that, but I didn't know that they actually fully launched something.
Now I don't know if it's exactly that, but my understanding is it's like ed tech companies can basically get like a paid version of YouTube that they, and then like creators who are in that, they'll split the revenue. I mean, it seems really like that seems to me like a big missed opportunity a decade ago. Like edutubers was a huge, right? Like they tried to do that. They got kind of drowned out by everyone else in the platform, but like there is just phenomenal educational content on YouTube that, like, aside from, I think like schools use some of it, right? Like Khan Academy, and they use like the Green Brothers stuff, but like that seems to me like something where it just feels like they haven't, it feels like a space for savvy innovation that could really help creators, and they haven't for some reason like cracked that one yet.
Yeah. When you look at YouTube's history, what are some of the key moments that stand out to you as like, this is a moment creators need to be aware of because this is when blank changed or that thing pivoted or became different or something in terms of helping us as creators understand how we should now approach our content strategy? What are some of those key moments?
Yeah, I mean, this is like ancient history now, but like the switch to watch time, and you remember in 2012, it was really big, and that like changed people. That just changed the way that like YouTube worked, like all sorts of, like
Absolutely.
what we're doing right now, like a podcasting, vlogging, like that stuff became much more. In fact,
I think it was 10 years ago to today or tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken.
That might be true.
Because I think it was October 12th, 2012.
Yeah, we're
recording this on October 11th.
Yeah, there we go, 10-year anniversary. And now, weirdly, like, I mean, they're pivoting to like short form now. Because I talk about this in the book, like Freddie Wong, like Mystery Guitar Man, like some of the bigger YouTubers back then and creators, they were spending like a week on like one like minute long video that they would drop. Like Mystery Guitar Man, usually that was his cadence, right? Joe Pennis. And they were really creative and they were great. And like he got a lot of views and like did really well. And I think that the platform started to reward different types of content. And there are reasons, like they were trying to avoid the clickbait problem. They felt like their business was maybe stagnating. I do think another key point, which everyone felt, is like beginning of 2018 when they changed how the threshold for the partner program, right?
What was that? To 1,000 or 10,000?
Yeah, and like a certain number of watch hours and subscribers. And before that, it was pretty much open to anyone. And
I remember that. Yeah,
content moderation problems, and then like you had some bit like the Logan Paul scandals, and like just a series of which the book goes into like some of that drama, like with PewDiePie, and like there were, it's like there was this interesting phrase that people inside YouTube use that I thought was pretty powerful. It's like not all pixels are alike. It was what one person used to argue, and like because I think there's a strain in the company that like they want to treat everyone equally. Like that's really important to YouTube, and you probably heard this from people there too. Like they don't want to treat any two creators differently, and yet other people were like there's like just different gradients of content. Like some content, like the other thing they said is like maybe not everyone deserves to be monetized, and that's like how YouTube operates now, right? Like not every video is monetized. Since 2018, they've added back, and now like over 2 million in the partner program, and like with YouTube Shorts, they're adding a lot more. I don't think it's ever going to be back to where it was before 2018. But that's probably like that just doesn't make sense for their business, right? Like it's too risky to have a problem what they have with like advertisers boycotting inappropriate material. I think that was a really major change. It was, they described that to me, that thresholds, as like that's where they kind of calculated what would make a living wage for someone who could make earnings. But I mean, they haven't really like necessarily disclosed that, right? Like I think that you tell me, but like there's been some more consistency, but like the earnings still, AdSense still fluctuates quite a bit.
Absolutely,
right?
they do. Yeah, there's no way to predict, and we've seen that different niches obviously make different amounts because there's more competition for ads in certain spaces than there are in others. Like insurance or gardening is going to have higher CPMs than if you get kind of stuck in the kids app where there's like no ads.
Oh, that was another. I think that's the third major event was after the OCAPA, and after which everyone in family and kids knows pretty well. And that was like really the only time that YouTube's been regulated, like the FTC finding them, and YouTube. I mean, to me, it feels like dramatically different. Just like even how it works, right? If you mark your video as made for kids,
that was stressful for a lot of people. You and I were both at Vid Summit. What was that, last week, 2 weeks ago, something like that? And I talked to a few kid creators who were like, "We can't do it anymore." Like, there's one person I know I talked to there who gets 5 million views a day.
Oh my God.
And because of 5 million views a day, even though their RPM, what they're actually earning per 1,000 views, is somewhere around 20 cents. It still adds up okay for them, right? But unless you are getting 5 million views a day, it's really hard to make the kids thing work. So we've worked with very few kid creators since CAPA. Since the FTC fined YouTube and YouTube had to crack down on tracking,
it's still the biggest channels right now, and at least in the US, are all kids channels.
Yeah, and then after CAPA, has there been anything recently that would help influence?
I do think like what they announced last month in September around the partner program and Shorts, like. That was like they were signaling that, right? That they're going to start monetizing Shorts. Like, it's so funny. Like, YouTube talks about this as like, we're the first platform to pay short form video at scale. And it's basically their way of saying like TikTok doesn't do this at scale, which I think is true. I don't know how you define at scale, but like there's a lot of problems with the TikTok, the way the TikTok's set up.
I saw that TikTok lost 7 billion last year or something like that too.
Yeah. I mean, like YouTube throughout its history, like YouTube wasn't really profitable for a very long time, and Google was like subsidizing its growth. So I think that's the same way, right? Like I think TikTok has been much more aggressive in like marketing on Facebook and stuff, but YouTube spent a lot of money on remember like the big Spotlight campaign where they put YouTubers on billboards.
And buses in New York and stuff. Yeah.
I mean, that stuff is really, it's a little bit like, I'm wondering if they're going to get back to like, that was the same. They were also getting the YouTubers and interviewed Obama his last 2 years of the presidency.
I think the public perceived YouTube differently back then, which is why it didn't work. But I think that now YouTube and TV are a little bit more synonymous than they used to be. That's right. And people are now going to YouTube more for entertainment and not just connection, like we said before. And so I think people are seeing it more as a place where I can watch shows that I want to watch and less of like, how do I connect with a community of people? So I think it might start working again. In fact, I forget what research this was, but people spent more time on TikTok than on Facebook this year or last year.
Yeah, there's a Pew study,
Pew study, okay, yeah. And one of the conclusions that came from that was that people don't care as much about connecting with each other now as they care about just straight up dopamine hits and entertainment, which is what TikTok gives you, right?
Yeah, and they still watch like way more. They spend way more time on YouTube than either of them. I think you may be right. I mean, that's like I feel like that's kind of unfortunate. I can think that's unfortunate. I do think there's something like sort of wonderful about the community aspect of YouTube that's been rubbed out. I like it. Yeah. I don't like, in some ways, like does Mr. Beast have like a community of fans or is it just sort of like he's just a star, right? And like an entertainer.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think it might be different to different people, but I think that's why it's going to, the billboard, I think that's why it might work now, doing the more traditional media promotions and stuff for different series. And
what's also interesting
about that, that's a guess.
Is that like I feel like another thing that YouTube used to talk about they had these term internally I thought was really interesting about like the SNL model and like the Oprah model, right? The SNL model, they thought that like, SNL, it's like stars go on SNL, and then they go in the movie. They like from there they go into movies, and there was this expectation like that was what would happen on YouTube. Like remember Fred? It was like if you remember Fred,
yeah,
Fred
totally.
was like early. Fred Lucas Cruikshank is a great, delightful creator. He was the biggest YouTuber in the world at one point.
Crazy creator, yeah.
And then he makes like 3 movies with Nickelodeon, and like everyone thinks he's going to be like a movie star. And like Lucas was like, he's now back in being a blogger again. He's like, I kind of like it more in YouTube, and that's just a personal choice, I think. Lily Singh's like TV show didn't take off. Like I could be wrong. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I don't see like Jimmy, Mr. Beast, like making TV and movies. Like I think he's like happy on YouTube, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I'm just wondering if in another 5 years from now will we see like Lily and Lucas, Noring Orange went to Nickelodeon too. Like were they just before their time? And they're, like the viewer expectations. I don't know. It's a hypothesis.
Maybe. I mean, there's a really interesting. The end of the book is this really fascinating, which people should go watch. There's a conversation that Hank Green had with Susan Wojcicki, CEO of YouTube. It was like early in the pandemic, and he was like having this conversation with not an argument. He was like talking to her about like the original program we talked about earlier, like when they gave a bunch of money to do YouTube originals. They were basically trying to like turn YouTube into TV, right? They were producing like TV shows,
right? And
he's like, why didn't you just give the money just as like grants to a bunch of creators to build their own businesses, right?
Right.
I don't think that YouTube had a great response for that. I don't know. Like,
well, they did. They were trying to build the star power and bring the celebrities to YouTube that would attract advertising dollars. That would make advertisers feel safe and comfortable putting money there. No one had heard of Philip DeFranco, and he's not the most family-friendly guy either.
You're right. Yeah. He had he had to stop producing Beautiful Bastards. I think that's right. That might be changing now. So what's also happening to go back to your earlier question with the future, like people are following us a little closely. Like the advertising business model is starting to, it's like not as profitable as it was before. And that's because like there's regulation, there's privacy stuff. There's like just a bit more political threat. Apple has like kind of made it really hard to do targeted ads on iPhones. And that's hit Facebook, that's hit YouTube for sure. So I wonder if like, that model of we don't need to make like stars that scale, like we don't need to turn everyone into a TV and movie star. I wonder if like there's like what Hank Green talks about is like the middle class of creators. I do think that maybe YouTube might start putting more attention to that because the advertising model is not as profitable as it was before.
Yeah, with the creators that we've worked with, we see it very consistently that creators who 50,000 subs, several 100,000 subscribers are often making a lot more money and have much higher conversions into sales for products and services that they offer compared to what multi-million subscriber channels are making just with ad revenue and even sales of their own. And it feels like that these smaller channels have a more intimate level of community built with their audience than the big multi-million subscriber channels do. And that higher level of emotional connection in the smaller communities leads to more trust and leads to higher conversion rates into sales for products and services. And thus the smaller creators sometimes make more money than the big creators. We worked with one creator, this was a few years ago, but he had just over 3,000 subscribers and he was making over $2 million a year from his YouTube channel, right? And almost none of it was from ads. It was 100% from affiliates and commissions and sales for a very small but highly valuable audience that he had. So I
mean, Google wants that in some ways, but in other ways, Google he's not. Google doesn't get a cut of that.
No,
right?
Yeah. But I do think to your point that there's something that about the middle class, or maybe that was Hank's point, the middle class creator, there's a lot of opportunity. And I use air quotes because, middle class, like there's not classes of creators.
Yeah.
But that, not huge, but not just getting started creator, whatever you want to call them, that there's a lot of financial value there I think not only for that creator, but potentially for YouTube. And I think that's maybe why they're trying to tap into that with merch store stuff and with
Right.
super
Commerce is a
chats
big,
and
yeah.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, commerce was, it's so funny because commerce was like a big focus of theirs last year. I don't hear as much about it this year.
I think they're trying to go off a lot of China's success with live shopping and everything. And I think there's depends on who you talk to, but my perspective is like, there's reasons why that works there and not here.
That's right.
And, and I think we don't have some of the same cultural things that they have that.
Yeah. Well, this is just the one final point. Like, this is like a bit of a tea leaf reading, but like, so inside baseball, but I think creators should know this. Like Robert Kinsel, who's the chief business officer, he was their first YouTube's first Hollywood hire. He was the guy who kind of led the originals program, and was early on. He was like, his job was to get TV and record labels onto YouTube, which he succeeded on. Like, that's 10 years ago, they weren't there. And now you have like every late night show, every like major record musician is on YouTube. And he's started to do a lot more of the creator program. So he left. He's now at a record label. Their replacement is a YouTube like Google Ads person who worked with small businesses. So like in some ways, maybe that's if you're more interested in sort of not being like if you're trying to build like this sort of middle class career on YouTube, like maybe that's a good sign.
Yeah. I think that's a good, based on what you see YouTube doing with hires like that, and based on their priorities with the YouTube Partner Program and things in general. What does YouTube's future you think look like for creators? And what decisions should we be making now?
I mean, I always think that like I feel like the most successful creators can't depend on YouTube for anything necessarily. I mean, that's bleak, but like
I'm not saying I disagree. It's just sad.
Yeah, like the grant, and that's like the platform is it's so big, and their incentives are not to like necessarily. Maybe there's big stars that they're like, but how many people have like a senior partner manager at like relative to the number of creators? It's like not many, right? So and like that, to your point, like the ones who are successful can build like businesses that like. Not necessarily all on the platform, right? Like whether they can sell a merchandise or like a product line or it's like something that, or like some sort of membership program, like people that like a way that they have built a community and audience and memberships and like to support them if and when like inevitably like the algorithm doesn't, right? Or like the search and discovery doesn't work. And I think like for creators, I mean, I think they're going to be looking at things that do well on short form. They're going to be like looking for things that do well on TV. YouTube TV is a big product push for them, and I think I think they're like especially attuned to competition. So people that are like spending more time on TikTok is something that like YouTube's going to start. But I think probably good for creators.
Yeah, when YouTube TV launched. I had I see what's going on here. They're trying to, and this is what I envisioned seeing, and I don't really see it as much. I'd like to hear what you think the gameplay here is. Like my wife loves Survivor, like for example. And so she's watching Survivor on YouTube TV, and right after Survivor, the television show ends, the next suggested video for you to watch is a YouTube creator live streaming a reaction to the episode they just watched together. I thought it was going to be, or you're watching HGTV about like a home reno or something, and then the next after the episode with Joanna Gaines is an episode of how to actually use shiplap to do this in your bedroom or something on YouTube, right? So I thought we would start seeing this television and YouTube worlds kind of like merging together, but it doesn't seem to be happening. It mostly seems to be like television is mostly television content, and YouTube is pretty much just YouTube content. Do you foresee that, like, as we think about our content going forward in the future, that how can we piggyback our content on popular television episodes or anything, or probably not?
I think, I do. I imagine that would be a direction that YouTube wants to go. Like they don't, and when I say YouTube TV, I mean also not just the product that they sell, like the over the top thing, but the actual like YouTube on smart TVs. Like that's where if you see a lot of their messaging, a lot of their messaging is like, and that's just they're trying to convince advertisers like, look, we're like on TV.
Yeah.
The stat they shared last year is like 700 million hours a day on television. Big. So I do think that like whether it's stuff that just fits seamlessly into like popular television stuff that plays well on a big screen. Like, it's like always this tough balance, right? Because like as you know, like there's a tension between like high production value and then like what does really well on YouTube, which tends to be things that are like people who are authentic, right? Like intimate. And so like just because you have a high production value doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do well.
Yeah, it's this hard tension because on mobile, like people tend to skip and abandon content pretty quickly to go on to the next thing if you don't quickly hold their attention. And on television, the average view durations are a lot higher because it's a more passive, lean back viewing experience versus a lean in viewing experience, which is what mobile and desktop tends to be. Yeah. So how do you optimize for both of those viewers? Oof, that's a challenge. The best answer I have is to just tell amazing stories, because I think if people start feeling something quickly in your content and they start being pulled in emotionally, the size of the screen doesn't matter as much. If they're like, oh my gosh, I need to come, like it doesn't matter if it's an hour long. Well, it does, but I mean, if it's a really good story that holds their attention. And remember, what was it, Coney 2012? Is that what it was? The first video to reach 1 million views in less than 24 hours. That big documentary. Remember, I think it was Coney. Was it Coney or Kona or something like that?
I actually don't know that one. I don't know that stat. I didn't know it was
a 30-minute in 2012. It was a 30-minute long documentary, and it was the first video go in that time mega viral to 1 million views in less than 24 hours. When at that time everyone was saying go shorter, cat videos is the way to go. They broke all the rules in the first video in internet history to get to 1 million views in less than 24 hours, and so, but that video made you feel something. It was a good story that got you emotionally engaged and held you your attention all the way through to the end. And so that's when I'm starting to think like the screen size becomes less important. There is actually a lot going on with YouTube currently, with how big it is and where all this is going. And I would highly recommend you guys pick up the book, like, comment, subscribe by Mark Bergen. Link to it down in the show notes. There's an audiobook now as well.
Oh yeah, audiobook too. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's great. So good professional narrator and everything. Yeah.
Did you narrate it or no?
No. We got a professional. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Some guy with some good British accent, I'm sure. Yeah. So you guys check out the link down below to check it out. And Mark, where can they follow you and more of the things that you're writing about YouTube?
Yeah, I'm at MH Bergen, Bergen, on Twitter, and then at Bloomberg News and our entire Bloomberg tech team.
Cool. I'll put links to those in the show notes as well. You guys can go check them out. Thanks for hanging out for another Video Creators Podcast episode, and we'll see you guys again next week for another one. See you guys then. Bye.